Yes, I'm Batman.
I'm Batman. I'm Batman, Alfred.
I'm Batman.
I am Batman!
I'm Batman. I'm Batman.
Greetings and welcome back to Holy BatCast, brought to you by real fans for real movies. Please visit our website, holybatcast.com, so we're going to find everything you need about the show. We are also all over social media because, of course, we are. Everybody is. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. Just search for Holy BatCast and you will find us. We're also on Patreon, so if you'd like to help support the show and become a more permanent part of the Bat family, you can do that at patreon.com/holybatcast. And I've got to take a moment to thank our latest patron, Mr. Preston Willis. Thank you, Preston. Great to hear from you, and welcome to the family. So again, folks, if you would like to become a patron, it is patreon.com/holybatcast. We're also part of the Real Fans Podcast Network, so if you want to check out some of the other shows on the network, you can do that at rf4rm.com. And as always, I'm your host, Andy DiGenova. Hello. And if you'd like to follow me when I'm not talking about Batman, you can do that on Twitter or on Instagram. It's just my name, Andy DiGenova, ANDYDIGENOVA. Now, this episode, we're going to be doing something different. We're going to be discussing and reviewing the unproduced script for Batman 2 that was eventually became Batman Returns. So Batman 2, written by Sam Hamm, we read it and we want to talk about it. Joining me to talk about that is my Bat brother. He's back 2 weeks in a row because he just can't stay away. It's Jamie Drewley. Hey, Jamie.
I'm addicted to this podcast thing, apparently.
There are far worse addictions to have, so I don't feel...
That's true. It's very true.
Count your blessings.
Of course, I'm addicted to comic books. I'm addicted to podcasts. It's like geeky stuff. It's like my cocaine and my crack all in one.
I see. But again, still not the worst things you could be addicted to.
It's true. I could actually be addicted to cocaine and crack, which would be just a menace.
Would be much worse.
Yes.
So... it's all good. It is just the two of us. Unfortunately, Brendan Lowe cannot join us for this episode, but it's a big week for him. He is participating in Australia's 139th annual emu races. And it's great. The thing is, though, is that every emu that loses actually gets cooked and eaten. It's a barbaric country down there.
Yeah, it truly is. Brendan, put all your money on Bogan. I'm thinking he's going to win.
I think you're right. But anyway, without further ado, we're doing something kind of fun. It actually was a request from one of the listeners. I can't remember who it was because it was a month or two ago. But it was one of those that it was always kind of in the back of my mind. And one of the listeners was like, hey, have you guys ever thought about reviewing the script to Batman 2 by Sam Hamm? That would be really cool. And I was like, you know what? That would be really cool. Let's do it. And so I made you do homework, Jamie, and I made you read a whole script.
I haven't read any comics for 2 days because of this.
Sorry, man.
It's all your fault.
Priorities. Podcast.
I guess.
Podcast comes first. You have an audience that you've got to make happy.
Yeah, I mean, they do pay my bills and everything, so.
Thank God for that.
Right. If not for these fat podcast ducats, whatever would I do?
Woo! So, we thought this would be a great thing to discuss. And so, we read it, we did our homework, and now we're going to take a look at Sam Hamm's script for Batman 2. Obviously, Batman 2 was the original script for Batman Returns, and to my knowledge, Sam Hamm was hired by the studio to write the script. They knew they wanted a sequel after the smashing success of Batman in 1989, and so they immediately hired Sam Hamm, who wrote most of the script for Batman 89. There were some updates and some changes made after the fact that he was not a part of. He will tell you all about it on the documentary for that's on the Batman Blu-ray, but he wrote most of the story for Batman 89, and so they were like, hey, this guy did it the first time, let him do it again. And so he wrote a draft for Batman 2, turned it in, and at that point, Tim Burton was unsure if he was coming back. And when he did come back, he wanted to start from scratch, start over again, and so he brought in his own writer, which was Daniel Waters, who had just had some success with Heathers. He liked Daniel Waters' dark, comedic sensibility, and so Sam Hamm walked away. Daniel Waters took the script that was written and made it his own, and there were a couple things that do carry over, which I was surprised by, but for the most part, it's pretty darn different. So this is a very fun, like, what-if scenario, which we've talked about a lot of those over the years. We talked about what if Superman Lives had happened? What if Tim Burton had done Batman Forever? What if this, what if Superman Flyby had gotten made? Whatever. There have been a lot of these starts and stops for different DC movies over the years, and it's fun as fans to look back at what could have been and just kind of take stock of it. Another thing that would be fun to do someday, Jamie, is the Wolfgang Peterson, I think is Andrew Kevin Walker script for the original Batman vs. Superman.
I was thinking Justice League Mortal, but yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to doing it. This is actually the first script I've ever read from beginning to end, and I enjoyed it. However, it was very time consuming. I don't get a lot of free time to do this sort of thing. I mean, I can read a comic book in about 10 minutes. So, the 2.5 hours I had to put into reading this over the span of 2 days was a little rough. So it's not something I want to get in the habit of doing frequently, but I'm not opposed to doing it again.
Sorry, that's still my fault.
It is totally your fault.
I remember it going faster the first time I read it years ago, but yeah, you were like, how long does it take to read? And I'm like, I don't know, hour and a half? And then I reread it, and I was like, oh, I lied to Jamie. This is taking way longer than an hour. It's also because I get distracted easily, so I would read a little bit, and then I would pick up my phone, or I'd read a little bit, and then I'd check Twitter, which I shouldn't do because that just puts me in a bad mood. But yeah, so it probably took me way longer than it took you. But we read it. And I guess what I would like to do is I'll give just kind of a high-level synopsis of the story as it exists in Batman 2. And then we can talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, what we thought worked, and all that good stuff. But folks out there listening, I did tease this on Twitter. I said, hey, we're reading this for the podcast, and a couple people were like, oh man, I would love to read that. It's out there. It's super easy to find. Honestly, all you have to do is Google Batman 2 script, I think, and it'll come up. It's that easy. So if you think that this is some long lost thing that you've got to know people who know people to get a copy, you don't. The internet makes everything accessible. So if you'd like to read the script, it's super easy to find. It is going to take you a little while to read it, but I would recommend reading it because it's fun to see how this film was originally envisioned, at least by the screenwriter. And so if you want to read it, that's great. If you just want to listen to us talk about it, that's great too, and maybe we save you from having to read it. It's up to you. But I will just say, I don't know how our conversation's going to go, so we might not hit every single point. So it's up to you how you want to do this. But anyway, Batman 2. You ready, Jamie?
I am ready.
All right. You got your jingle bells on, your Santa suit on, you're about to jump on a snowmobile.
I got antlers in my Batmobile window.
Awesome. Excellent. A little red nose on the front.
That's correct. Yes.
Perfect. So as you can imagine, or as I just implied, Batman 2 is still a Christmas movie, just like Batman Returns is. So that is, from the very beginning of the script, that is where you start to see some similarities. So the Christmas wintertime setting was already part of the story. In fact, the first line is one of the best lines in the whole script. It says, "It's happened, hell has frozen over." Which is just a great opening line to a script that's going to be about Gotham covered in snow at Christmas time.
There are a couple of descriptors that Hamm used throughout this script that I did get chuckles out of, and that was one of them.
Yeah, it's good. It's a perfect way to be like, welcome back. I love that. And so I won't go into every single beat, but overall, this does take place right after Batman 89. This is a direct sequel to Batman 89. And so this is the Christmas season following Batman's defeat of the Joker, and Gotham loves Batman. They have embraced their new hero. There is a store that sells Batman stuff. Batmania has taken over Gotham City just in time for Christmas. So there's even a store selling broken up old pieces of the Batwing from when it crashed in front of the cathedral in Batman, which I thought was a very cool touch. I love that.
Yep.
Everybody's wearing Batman shirts. In fact, there's a gang now, the Order of the Bat, who are vigilante-ish, and they wear Batman shirts and red berets, and they go out and they patrol the city because they've been inspired by Batman.
It's kind of a halfway nod between the Sons of the Batman in Dark Knight Returns and the Guardian Angels, which was, I don't know if it's still a thing, but was a thing back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. And even what we eventually saw in The Dark Knight, with these copycats being like, oh, if Batman can do it, I want to help.
Yeah, the hockey pad guys, yeah.
Yeah. And these guys don't even wear hockey pads. They just wear berets.
They're just that tough.
They're just so cool. So it's Christmas in Gotham. Everything is going swimmingly. People love Batman. Who doesn't? And, of course, though, it's the beginning of a Batman movie, so something goes wrong, and there's a jewelry robbery, and it's, these guys rob a jewelry store, and one of the robbers is Santa Claus, and they all escape on snowmobiles, and the cops try to give chase, and because it's snowy, it's hard for them to do it, and the bat signal lights up the sky, and here comes Batman in the Batmobile, and the big opening chase ensues. It's pretty much all Batmobile focused. Batman never gets out of the car for this opening action scene, but it's a chase through Gotham Park. The Batmobile's got a flamethrower, he's got missiles, he's got gadgets galore to take down these snowmobile thugs one by one, and the last one he takes out is Santa Claus, who he gift wraps for the cops in a net. So it's this cool big action scene through the park with the Batmobile chasing after these bad guys on snowmobiles.
This opened up and I started reading it with the snowmobiles and the thugs and everything, and all I could think to myself was, oh, Mr. Freeze was in the original Part 2 script. Interesting.
I didn't even think about that, but I could see it.
Because I didn't know anything about this going in. I mean, literally nothing at all about it. I just know this was not the script that was used, obviously. So
Right. But still some similarities here between like this opening and what eventually turned up in Batman Returns is this big Christmas time opening in the snow. Batman comes and takes out some of these guys with the Batmobile, and then things they diverge a bit because in Returns he gets out of the car, he punches some guys, he saves Selena Kyle, things like that. But there's some similarities there.
Yeah, definitely. And better use of a flamethrower in the script than I think what happened in Returns too.
Well,
but it's not exactly the same concept either. So.
Well, the way it's written is like he's charging through Gotham with the flamethrower on without turning it off.
Yeah, because he's melting out the snow and ice so that the car maintains traction in the middle of the chase. Yeah. Which to me is I don't know about how the whole logistics of that work out with the fuel tank that runs long enough to keep a 40-foot flame going. But I'm kind of thinking this is an ingenious idea, and I may test it out come about December of this year.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah. I'm sure I won't get any kind of citation or anything for that.
I'm sure that'll work out for you. But yeah, it's the thanks for saving the day Batman moment. And there is a great moment in this opening action sequence where the Batmobile launches 2 torpedoes, and they're described as like shark fins in the snow.
Yes. Going
after the snowmobiles, which I thought was pretty awesome. It was a great visual. I loved picturing it.
Yeah, like I said, some of the descriptors in there are really cool for this. It really helped. It really helped the reader of it get into the image of what was going on.
Well, tell me this, Jamie, because I felt after I read this, I felt like I just watched a movie.
Yeah, definitely. And interestingly enough, I mean, as I'm reading Bruce and Batman, I'm picturing Keaton in and out of costume.
Of course.
Michael Goff as Alfred.
Mm-hmm.
Kim Basinger as Vicky Vale. Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon. I have all of the cast going through my head there. But Penguin, I was kind of in and out trying to go with DeVito and a more traditional, dapper sort of a Penguin, tuxedo and whatnot. And Catwoman was completely never Michelle Pfeiffer for me. And that's not because I have any issue with Michelle Pfeiffer, but for some reason, the Catwoman I was envisioning was more like the one that is, more current and modern with the short, pixie haircut kind of thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
And, more of the, I don't want to say dark complected, but just like a darker look overall, not the blonde hair, blue eyed look, but the, the dark hair, dark eyes, that sort of a look.
Yeah, I agree. I think for almost all the characters in my imagination, they kind of shifted from who was eventually cast or was already cast in Batman Returns, and then almost to like a comic book version, and kind of back and forth as it went. I never pictured Marlon Wayans as Dick Grayson.
Nope, I never saw that either. I didn't have any image. I mean, just generic dark-haired boy is all I had in my mind for that. Just like the Penguin's thugs, I didn't really have anything for them. All the other of the 5 families, as they keep referring to them in Gotham, I just had like a generic thing in my mind for them. I didn't have anything that particularly stood out there. But
right. So, as we just alluded to, Penguin and Catwoman are still the villains in this film. The Penguin is, we first meet him in his prison cell, where he's getting himself prettied up, and he's got all these birds in the cell, which I don't know how you get approval to keep that many birds in your cell, but it's Gotham.
Because Gotham, exactly.
It's Gotham. What are you going to do? And here's something interesting. They call the Penguin Mr. Boniface.
Which is really weird because I work with a guy whose last name is Boniface. So,
well, one of my best friends in high school, his last name was Boniface, and so I thought that was interesting. And I did, when I tweeted this out, I did get a response of like, why do they call the Penguin Mr. Boniface? Do you know the answer, Jamie?
I do not.
Because that was his original name in his first appearance.
No kidding.
Yeah. And
so Cobblepot was tacked on later, huh?
Yeah, in that initial appearance, I don't know if someone calls him Boniface or if he calls himself that, but that was his original name. And then later, they changed the name to Oswald Cobblepot, and so they just say, oh, in that original one, he was giving a pseudonym, or that was a pseudonym. That wasn't his real name. And so I think this was Sam Hamm's little nod to the original appearance of the Penguin.
Nice stroke there.
But it's obscure. Like, that is not a super well-known, and I had to do some digging to figure out that's where the name came from. So, but yeah, so Mr. Boniface, he's in prison, and he's a reformed man, and so he's willing to give back all the money he stole if they'll parole him, or he doesn't even put that on it. He says, yeah, take the money, and they say, oh, you've given, I think it was 13 years. They give so many years of good service, and you're giving this back, and okay, you're paroled. And so he is out to go start trouble in Gotham. He does have 2 henchmen, as you mentioned, Frick and Frack, which is so very Batman 66.
Yeah, it kind of is.
They
might as well have been wearing shirts that said Thug Number 1 and Thug Number 2.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of Batman 66 in this script, I'll say. But you could say that about what eventually ended up in Batman Returns too. So, but Frick and Frack definitely reminded me of the generic thugs that were always following these guys in the old show.
Side note, I forgot to tell you, we went up to this little lake retreat thing. It'll be 2 weeks ago this Sunday, and I didn't take my phone with me because I wish I would have, because they had this giant paddle boat that looked like a rubber duck.
Oh, be still my heart.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, Andy would crap if he saw this.
I love the duck. I love it. So Mr. Boniface is let loose. Frick and Frack pick him up, and there's a great moment where he gave back the $42 million, and he asked them, oh, what have we got left? And they're like, oh, well, we did what you said, and we invested it, and we still have $76 million after giving the 42 back, which I thought was a great moment of like, oh yeah, look at what a great guy he is, but he's still doing okay.
That took a lot of forethought to do it, but I mean, I can appreciate that from a villain who's probably strongest attribute would be, I guess, his intellect, maybe.
Yeah.
Having the forethought to think about investing this money so that there is money left over when he does get caught and gets out. I mean, I really thought that was a pretty ingenious stroke there. And I just want to take a second to say, I like the fact that they just kind of hit the ground running with these villains in here.
Yeah,
and they
no
don't
origins.
play this as an origin film.
No origins. I so agree.
Penguin is essentially established. Catwoman is essentially established. I mean, obviously you're being introduced to them, so there's stuff that you learn about them as far as this presentation, but you don't find out how she became Catwoman. You don't find out what his history is becoming this crime lord and whatnot. It just they're there. That they just don't treat the audience dumb. They just, okay, these guys are here. We'll tell you where they've kind of been up to now, but that's that. We're not playing this Joker game this time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that about it. It's like, no, he's just the Penguin. That's just Catwoman, and away we go. I love that. Although we do find out in a flashback that the Penguin in his youth killed Alfred's brother, and Catwoman in her youth beat out Vicky Vale to be the head cheerleader at Gotham High School. So
that sounds like some Gotham stuff to me. I don't know.
It's like Jack Napier killing the Waynes. That's what I was going for. Sorry.
And
maybe it didn't work. Maybe
because I like to do this sort of thing and jump ahead. I mean, how do you like the fact that they retconned that again?
I know they do. But you know what? I didn't mind it.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
there are definitely some things in this script I do not like. That one I kind of dug.
I could have done without that. However, you've already kind of laid the groundwork in the previous movie that's who it was. So, I mean, how do you back out of that with this script? You really can't. Mm-hmm. I would have liked a little bit more. I mean, if they went ahead with this script, I would have liked a little bit more fleshing out about how that worked.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it just feels like kind of like the retcons they do in comics from time to time, where they're just like, well, ignore what we told you before because this is how it is now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was okay with it. I didn't mind it. But, I mean, I guess since you're jumping there, I guess we'll address it now. There's always two versions of the Wayne murders. There's the version where it's a random mugger, bad luck, shit happens, and there's that. Then there's the other version where it's part of a greater conspiracy. I've always preferred option A. For me, I think it's more powerful as a random mugger, and sometimes bad crime happens, and now Batman's going to stop those random things happening to other people. The conspiracy thing I like less, but it's been done enough over the years that it doesn't get my panties in a wad. I don't really care. So, because I'm used to seeing it enough that I'm like, oh, okay. In this version, it's part of something else. And so here, when you learn you learn that Thomas Wayne was murdered for a reason. I go, oh, okay, all right. And I liked the connective tissue again, back to the first film.
Okay.
So, and that's something I'll say about the entire script. That's my favorite thing about this script, is that it is undoubtedly and unabashedly a sequel to Batman 89. And, that's always been my issue with Batman Returns, is that it is barely a sequel to Batman 89, and this is a straight up total sequel. And I like that. I like the continuity of following from one into another. And there's a lot of that in the script, which we'll get to, and I like those moments. That not necessarily the Wayne murder flashback, like that's certainly not my favorite. Mm-hmm. But the fact that Vicky Vale's still around, for me, that's a good thing. Because I remember being whatever, I must have been 13. I was like, where the hell's Vicky Vale? And then they have that throwaway line in Batman Returns, and I was like, okay, I guess they just broke up. So having Vicky Vale part of the proceedings here, I liked. And yeah,
that continuity with her, and to me, she felt like a much better character in this script than she did in the first movie.
For 2/3 of the movie, you're correct.
Okay.
The end, it ends up kind of in the same place, but for the first 2/3, I completely agree with you. They give her more to do, and she's got a nice little arc going. So there is the subplot in the script about the homeless in Gotham and how the homeless continue being pushed out of wherever they might be to make room for development, for high rises, for condos, for whatever. And so, there was a place where the homeless and the poor were living, and they've all been forcibly removed. Now they're all living in Gotham Park, and now they're going to be forcibly removed from the park because the park is going to get destroyed so they can build another high rise. So there's this thing about Gotham throwing away their homeless, and that's Vicky Vale's crusade in this movie. Is she takes an interest in that. She's doing what she can to fight against that. She's writing stories about it, taking photos. And so I like that as her motivation of like, no one cares about these people except me, and we've got to do something about that. So I really like that, but at a certain point it gets lost in the story, and there isn't a super satisfying resolution to it.
Fleshing out the ending a little bit better than just the little 2-line exchange between Vicky and Bruce about how they're going to, attempt to start solving that problem, I think would have went a long way to delivering closure to that.
Yes, because while it was happening, I was actually reading it, and I'm very sensitive about this stuff about like, your female characters need to be more than just a damsel in distress. They need to have their own motivation. They're not just there to be eye candy. They shouldn't just be there to be on the arm of the hero or to get saved by the hero. They should have their own shit going on. This is important, especially, this was in 1992, but even so, even in 1992. And I even remember when I found out Vicky Vale wasn't going to be in Batman Returns thinking, what a missed opportunity, because then Batman could be being pulled between Catwoman and Vicky, and that's exactly what happens in this script, but it didn't work out that way. So I do like that Vicky is back. She and Bruce are in a serious committed relationship, and there's some funny stuff about them trying to figure out what to get each other for Christmas, and Alfred's kind of caught in the middle, so there's some amusing stuff there, but they're together, they're happy.
Alfred's reply to her when she's like, what should I I got him skis or something like that. I forget what she says to him, but he's like, I find that getting him surveillance equipment is usually the best thing to go.
Right.
I thought that was hilarious.
Oh, there was another. I agree with you. There was a line, just because you reminded me of it, earlier on where I think it was during the Batmobile chase where, the description was something about like Batman is going through it mechanically, like it's a completely logical exercise while he's chasing these bad guys. And I just loved that description of like, for Batman, it's the job. He knows what he's doing. I just thought that was cool. But yeah,
to me, this script, especially to me, for the most part, there are some things that maybe I would have a little bit of contest to, which we may or may not get to later. I don't even know. But he seems to really have a grip on who the character of Batman is.
Oh, totally.
I don't think everybody who's written a Batman script over the last 30 years has that concept down. I'm just saying.
No, I agree. I think that Sam Hamm, when you read this script and you read the original Batman 89 script, which maybe we can do that someday, because that's an interesting read too. A lot of it's the same, obviously, but there's quite a bit that's different. I think Sam Hamm is a Batman fan. And I think you can tell when you read the script, because he's very careful about certain things like that. And that description's a perfect example.
Well, going after Penguin's original name like that when the two of us didn't know about it, kudos to him on that. That's pretty impressive, because it's not like he had Google at his fingertips in 1990 or 91 when he wrote this.
Right. Exactly. That's true. So I agree with you. You mentioned Alfred. Alfred gets a lot more in here too, which I love. And I love his relationship with Vicky in this. He and Vicky, you saw their bond in Batman 89, and you really get to see it continue here. And so I think there's some really nice moments between the two of them. Yeah,
they play off each other nicely, both in emotional moments and in humorous moments, both.
Totally. I completely agree there. So we've got the Penguin out there. We know he's got some sort of nefarious plan. We've got Vicky and Bruce playing house, happy as can be. We've got the homeless situation in Gotham, which Vicky's very worried about and is keeping Bruce honest about, keeping it in his forefront as well. And there's another great scene where they go to dinner together. They've got a date. They run into one of these 5 families. So there is a big thing, a big plot point about the 5 families of Gotham. So it's the Waynes, which is Bruce Wayne. And I've got the other ones written down because I knew I wasn't going to remember the names. The other ones are Shaw, Barrett, Provost, and Tiptree.
And Provost is the publisher that Vicky works for.
Correct. So
Okay.
Provost runs the Gotham Globe. Shaw, Barrett, and Tiptree, I can't remember what their jobs are.
They're just a little bit more generic, douchey billionaire.
It doesn't
people.
matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. They're essentially, yeah, you're right. The douchey, white collar, masters of the universe, drinking scotch, smoking cigars, talking about the little people. That's who they are. They're the families of Gotham, and then the Waynes. And so they run into one of these guys. I think it was Shaw at dinner, and Shaw's the one who's, I think he's the one kicking out the homeless. And so there's, Vicky kind of calls him on shit. And anyway, there's this whole thing, and Vicky eventually says to Bruce, isn't there something you can do about this? And he thinks she's talking about Batman, and he's like, what? I don't know who to punch to make this better. And she says, no, you, Bruce. And I think that was another really great moment.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what's going on there.
I think that was the one where she says, oh, what a pig. And he's like, I've known him since I was 7, and he was a pig back then.
Right. Exactly. So that's what's going on with the homeless. And then you've got the other wild card of Selina Kyle, the Catwoman. And you meet Selina Kyle on the docks. She shows up in a slinky outfit and a fur coat and immediately seduces a guy at the bar and eventually crashes this drug deal on the docks, between the docks and the ship, and kills everyone. And you think she's there for the drugs, but she's not. Which, funny, this is a little reminiscent of that last Batman animated series episode we just watched, where she busted up this whole thing and she was only after a gem and left everything else. Same thing here. Like, there was a big drug deal. She went through, she kills everybody, and all she wants is a statue of a raven, and she leaves all the drugs. And off she goes. And so this Catwoman is not the gray area anti-hero.
No, definitely not.
This is the femme fatale, seductive, evil murderess.
Yeah.
So it is a
I mean, we just had this discussion the other day. I said I prefer Catwoman to be a villain. I don't prefer her to be a redeemed villain or a hero. I like her to be a straight villain. And this script gave me the Catwoman I would have liked to have seen.
Yeah,
And
again,
I want to reimpress. I have no issues with Michelle Pfeiffer. I love Michelle Pfeiffer, and I love Michelle Pfeiffer in that role in Batman Returns. But this is just a different animal, no pun intended. It's
some pun intended.
Okay, maybe a little pun intended. But Catwoman in Batman Returns is completely unhinged. Mm-hmm. And maybe even possibly there's some supernatural element in there, which we went back and forth on that, but I don't want to get into it now. So this Catwoman is very different than that. This one is definitely a little bit unhinged, but she's not like psychopathic unhinged, quite like the level that we got in the finished product of the film.
Well, yeah, in Batman Returns, it's essentially her losing herself and getting more and more unhinged as the film goes on until she's finally lost it, essentially. But this is a villain who has a plan, who knows what she's doing. She's in control of her facilities and is making very definite choices as to what she's doing. So it's a completely different portrayal. In some ways, I like what they did in Batman Returns. I do think Catwoman is always kind of a gray area, and that's part of the fun of the character. She's not pure evil. She's not good. She's somewhere in the middle. And so to see one here that is so straight up, completely evil, it threw me off because I'm not used to that with this character. When you read that first scene and she murders everyone, you're like, what? Like, this is crazy. Like, she slashes throats with her claws. they're all dead. And there's a lot of violence in the script. I would imagine that if this had gone to some rewrites, that's some of the stuff that would have had to get massaged out, because some of the stuff with her is gruesome and violent.
It certainly is.
In
fact, the bulk majority of it is, particularly when she's in costume, is.
Oh, totally. And the first time I read this the first time maybe, 7 years ago, I think, 8. So some things I remembered, some things I completely had forgotten. But I know the first time I read it, that was something that really took me by surprise, was how unabashedly evil Catwoman was. And then reading it again for this, I was like, I kind of warmed up to it. Because you're right, there's no rule that says Catwoman can't just be a straight up villain. And who's to say that that's not valid too? Yeah.
And wasn't this the moment where she leaves the first card that essentially is trying to frame Batman?
Yeah. So that is the another thing that carries over from this script into Batman Returns is they frame Batman. Now, in Batman Returns, it's a much smaller piece of the puzzle. Yeah,
this one is a recurring theme front to back.
Yeah, and here it is through the entire film. It's, you're right, it starts in the Catwoman intro scene and goes all the way to the final scene. So
interestingly enough, I had a language lesson because one of the one guy that survives, she shredded his face apparently. Which, that definitely would have gotten toned down for the finished product if it went to print. He kept saying, and my pronunciation of this is probably going to be off because I'm terrible at speaking any language, including the one I've been speaking my whole life. So I think he said
Thank
something
God you're
like,
on a podcast.
Murcielago.
Okay.
Which I recognize as the name of a Lamborghini. And I thought, well, that's weird that he's talking about a Lamborghini. So I looked up what it means, and it's Spanish for bat. I did not know this.
No, I didn't know that either.
So now it makes sense why Batman or Bruce Wayne drives a Lamborghini Murcielago. I think it was a Murcielago in the Dark Knight. So
yeah, interesting. I didn't know that either.
And I'm probably mispronouncing the heck out of that word, but whatever. You can at me all you want. I'm not on the internet anyway. But so that was a fun trip to Google for that. I also did it with Catwoman's cat because I knew there had to be some relevance to that name because they kept using the cat's name over and over again.
Oh yeah, what was it?
It's like an Egyptian, like maybe an Egyptian goddess of like witchcraft and ghosts and stuff. I mean, there was like a goddess of like 5 things.
Okay.
So
interesting. So that is a very different version of Catwoman, and we mentioned the Penguin. It's a very different version of Penguin. This is the Penguin from the comics with the bird obsession, so he uses birds for everything throughout the script, which they didn't do pretty much any of that in Batman Returns.
The only bird involvement outside of penguins themselves was that canary that she put in her mouth. Right.
So, but here, he has the capability of getting birds to swarm his enemies and peck their eyes out. There's a great moment where he does that with his cellmate. He gives him a Walkman, and the Walkman emits a frequency that makes all these birds swarm and kill him, which is kind of awesome. And that's a recurring thing too, that we know that he has this capability. It comes back again at the end, which is great. But he uses birds for surveillance, and there's he sends one of the birds to eavesdrop on one of these 5 families of Gotham. I can't remember which one. I think it was Tiptree, but I don't know. But the bird has like a little microphone on him, and it flies through the duct, and it sits there so the Penguin can spy on these people. And so he uses the birds a lot in this. He's not a freak. He didn't come from the circus. We don't know where he came from, to your point earlier, which works for me. So it is much more of the grotesque but attempting to be dapper Penguin of the comics, of the 60s show, with the birds. A little bit of the trick umbrellas, not so much, not tons of it, but a little.
I thought it was just enough with that because that gimmick can get played out really fast.
Oh, see, I like it.
I don't have any problem with it, but I mean, he either needs like one umbrella that can do all of this stuff, or he needs to have like a quiver of umbrellas, Green Arrow style, where they all do these these different various things that they do. And I thought they showed a little bit of restraint with it, but I thought it was just enough to give you that nod.
You're
for
right.
a fan that knows that he would have, a bulletproof one, and obviously ones that shoot and so forth. So
yeah, there's enough of it that you can check the box and go, okay, yes, he uses the trick umbrella. But I feel like the only one he really uses is the gun.
That's the predominant one for sure.
But yeah, so that's, it's a little more, I guess you could say, traditional version of the Penguin, where he's more just a crime boss. He's just interested in crime. So I do wonder if maybe that is why Burton wanted the rewrite on the two villains, especially, is because the villains are very straightforward in this. They're both just bad guys, and there's not much else going on, and that can be fine. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Sometimes I miss when a villain is just a villain, but I think that he just wanted something meatier for them, and he gave it to them. So I think Batman Returns, they're both less traditional interpretations, but there's more going on under the surface.
Yeah.
And these are pretty straightforward. They're bad guys. The Penguin still has a lair. It's described as, he essentially has like an ice pool where he still has his Arctic birds. I assume that's like penguins and puffins and things. And because it's Christmas in Gotham, he has all the windows open.
That's the part about him I love. Like, he's embracing this cold like completely.
Yeah.
And it's driving everybody else crazy. Like Catwoman's all kinds of pissed off when she shows up at his place, shivering and teeth chattering and everything else. So
exactly. And I think it was like in a penthouse, right? It was like at the top of a building.
That could be. I don't.
That was the way. That's the way I remember it. But so he still has like a cool penguin lair. He's got his frickin' frack. And yeah, he and Catwoman are teamed up from the very beginning. In fact, it seems like he's the one who called Catwoman into town to start finding these Raven statues. So those are the MacGuffins in this film. They're after the Raven statues of the 5 families of Gotham. So each of the families have this statue that's been passed down from generation to generation, and they need all 5. And the reason they need all 5 is because they will all point to this great treasure, the treasure of Gotham.
I was seriously beginning to believe for a while there, because they don't get straight to this whole, X marks the spot treasure map thing with them.
Right.
That this was kind of where the idea of the Court of Owls was born.
There's a little bit of that. There's some shades of that in this. The secret society of Gotham, sure.
Right. Yeah. Except this was more about, not the same thing. And I'm not saying Scott Snyder even stole it, but I would almost venture a guess that maybe this did inspire the idea somewhere along the lines, or maybe it's purely coincidental. There's no way to know for sure, but
secret societies are not unheard of, right? No. It's the Masons, and this is kind of like the National Treasure Batman script.
Good call. Yeah.
Because that's essentially what it is you've got to get these 5 ravens, and then you take them to the busts of the ancestors, and you insert them, and you twist them each a quarter turn, and that opens up a map, which gives you the treasure map, and it's very National Treasure. You need... This script needs is Nicolas Cage's terrible toupee. That's what it needs. So...
Anyway, I kind of dug that. Once you get set into the idea of what they're doing with these... I kind of dug it. I kind of liked it. And then especially when they reveal where it's at, I actually, when that reveal came out of Penguin's mouth, I literally out loud, as I was sitting at work today, said, "Ruh-roh, Raggy."
It's kind of the perfect place.
Oh, of course. I don't
know if it makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense, because why wouldn't his great-grandfather know that those caverns and such were down there?
I guess. I just don't know why they would let one dude have it. If they're all in it, I don't know. It's convenient, but I'm willing to go with it because it's where it should be.
They said at one point that they never bothered to retrieve it because they never had to, because at that point they controlled the entire city.
Right. But I guess that's the thing, is like, if all 5 of them needed a statue, so they'd have to work together to get this thing, it's already in the possession of one of those 5 people. So that one person doesn't need statues. He could just take it whenever he wanted.
But I got the impression that whole statue and map thing was for the descendants. It wasn't for them.
Maybe. I'm willing to go with it. I just think it's convenient. I guess we'll come out with it because it's not like you're going to see this movie because it doesn't exist. But
Spoilers.
yes, you learn that once, and this jumps towards the end of the movies, they do eventually get all 5 statues. They go to like the city hall. They put the statues in. They turn
They put the staff of Ra into the ground, and the sunlight goes through the raven's eye and shows you where it's at.
Exactly. And then they get the map. They find out that the treasure is buried underneath Wayne Manor in the Batcave. Because of course it is. Because of course it is. So the Raven thing, this again, I didn't like the first time I read this. It's still not my favorite thing this time, but again, I'm a little more, I warmed up to it a little more. I guess what helps me with it is I can picture it in the animated series, and that helps me warm up to it a little bit. But I still have a hard time picturing it in a movie.
Okay.
No, I'm just curious as to what you think. I
don't have any problem with it. No, I actually quite like it. Like I say, at first I didn't grasp what was going on, but obviously that was done on purpose because, she retrieves that first one and I'm like, oh, well, she was just there to get some valuable artifact to add to her collection, or she was hired by him to get this artifact. If it would have been something with a cat, I would have assumed she was there for her own benefit. Since it was a bird, I assumed maybe, okay, she's in cahoots with him, so he wanted this valuable artifact for his collection or whatever. And then a second one shows up, and then all of a sudden now it's like, okay, there's something more to these. So then you're kind of aware of it, but then the reveal doesn't come until later yet. So no, I didn't have any problem with the Raven thing at all.
Okay, yeah, interesting. I don't know. I don't hate it. It just feels like that their evil plan just feels kind of shallow, I guess. It's like, oh, we get...
Well, it all boils down to money. Alvarin even pulls the Die Hard line on him toward the end there. He basically tells him, you're nothing but a common thief.
Right.
And his reply isn't, no, I'm an exceptional thief. His reply is, I'm a very uncommon thief. And I'm thinking, man, somebody who wrote that Die Hard script's really pissed off at you right now, dude.
That's true. I didn't even pick up on that. But yeah, so I guess that's it. It's like, oh, okay, like they're after buried treasure. Okay. It's one of the less compelling things about the movie for me. It's fine as like
I think the characters themselves carry enough personality and weight in this, and the side stuff going on with the homeless people, and we need to get into the whole discovery of the young boy out there in the slums or whatever. But anyway, I think the characters are compelling enough that the plot device itself is less important overall, at least for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do agree with that. Is that everything else is pretty good, so I'm willing to go with a somewhat cliche treasure hunt as the plot.
I do want to get my one of my biggest gripes, and this may actually be my biggest downturn with this script. And maybe it's being nitpicky. I don't know, but they indicated, it seems to me more than once, that she was the physical strength match for Batman. You want to portray Catwoman as being able to handle her own and fight toe-to-toe with Batman and do it in her own way without getting into necessarily a brute strength contest with him. I'm cool with that. I prefer that, actually. But you want to tell me that she's as strong as him? I was convinced at first that they were going to pull something that she was actually super powered in this. And I wasn't going to like that. But they never wound up giving any sort of an explanation for it. And again, she can hold her own with Batman. I'm perfectly fine with that. But the fact that she is his equal or better in physical strength, I have a really hard time buying that.
No, and that I think is something that would come out in production. Like whether you would buy that or not all comes down to how they would choreograph it and shoot it. So you can't have her picking him up over her head, and that never happens in the script. But yes, she's the only one he fights in the whole movie. And so it is shown that, yeah, she is somewhat his equal, but that's what happens in Batman Returns, and I never called BS on that.
Well, I called BS on that because he was plain stupid every time he fought her in that. But that's another story. No, it just, like I say, I don't even remember how it came up now, honestly. Maybe she got a grip on him and he couldn't find a way to break her grip because she was just, like he literally says in his mind or the way that the descriptors are coming out in the script that she was his equal in strength. And I was like, no, this is not going to work for me. And it's not because I don't believe a woman can be as strong as a man, but I have a hard time believing that this slender seductress who, gets by on her stealth and movement and everything else has the muscle mass where she could possibly match him on that front. Of course, we are talking about Michael Keaton here too, so maybe I'm going about this the wrong direction.
Well, like I said, she's pretty much the only one he fought with in Returns. It worked there. I think it could have worked here if they had, shot it the right way. It didn't really. I honestly didn't even think twice about it. But
the
it does
acrobatics that are described throughout this with Dick, Catwoman, Batman, it looked great in my mind. And, picturing comic panel styles, it looks fantastic. But all I could think to myself was, how the hell were they going to put this on film, especially in 1991 or 2?
Oh, totally. I totally thought that, especially with the Batsuit at that time, because Sam Hamm writes this like
a comic
it's a comic book.
Yeah.
So you can picture all this happening in comic form, but yeah, the mobility that would be required for Batman to do some of these things and Catwoman, it would have been a little trickier, but I appreciate that he didn't censor himself while he was writing it. He's like, write it how it should be, let them figure it out.
The little Batwing device that he had here, do you think that was what inspired the one that was used in Batman Begins?
I think it inspired the one that was in Batman Returns, which it in turn inspired the one in Batman Begins.
Okay.
So
yeah, I guess he did have it in Returns, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, that's another carryover is the that his cape could go rigid and become bat wings, where he could glide. And in Batman Returns, it's a moment. It's actually a great moment, but there's no explanation given, and it never comes up again. It just happens in that one scene. And in here, it's a plot point because they introduce the idea. They show that he's invented it. He shows it off to Alfred. Then it gets him out of a jam halfway through the movie. Then it comes back again. Catwoman uses it against him while they're in the subway. They're kind of crouched.
Which I thought was kind of a brilliant stroke there, too.
Yeah, they're kind of crouched into a little nook in the subway against
right
the
next
wall.
to Otis. Otis was in the next one right next to him.
Exactly. And then as a train was going by, and so she hits the thing, and as the wings start to expand, it starts pushing him out towards the train. So it comes back a few times. So it is cool that like Sam Hamm uses it multiple times, and Returns was like, oh, that's kind of fun. Let's just use it for a cool moment. But I thought that was interesting. And then you're right. Like, yeah, then it becomes a bigger deal in Batman Begins. To go back to, we were talking about Batman and Catwoman fighting, and she's the only one he really fights in this movie. This is my biggest problem with this script, and I would hope that if this had gone to rewrites, this would have been fixed. Batman and the Penguin have next to no interaction. And Batman doesn't even know the Penguin exists until the final confrontation.
Yeah, because they essentially abduct him, go to Wayne Manor, and that was really the first time that they crossed paths.
Yep, the first time they're in the same room together is when Selina drugs Bruce, and they take him back to Wayne Manor because they're going to go try to find this treasure that's in the caverns underneath. And as Selina drugs Bruce, Penguin enters, and that's the first time they're together, and that's the end of the movie. And so at no point is Bruce like, hey, who's this guy? Like, he knows who Catwoman is. He spends the whole movie pursuing Catwoman, but he never knows that Penguin is even a factor. And you want the Batman and the Penguin to meet. You just want that. And so I just feel like that's a miss in this script.
Yeah, it's one that got by me completely until you just brought it to my attention. I guess I kind of agree with you. It would have been nicer to have them a little bit more established to that point, but at the same time, looking back, I mean, it did not affect my enjoyment because it never crossed my mind to even think about it while I was reading it.
It's like The Fifth Element. Bruce Willis and Gary Oldman never meet, and it drives me nuts. How do you have a movie with Bruce Willis and Gary Oldman and you don't let them share a scene together? Are you crazy?
There wasn't enough scenery for the two of them to be there.
You gotta let the hero meet the villain. So that was one of those things where I'd be like, that would be my studio note. Is like, Batman has to know that there's a penguin. That's important.
This Batman still has a little bit of that possibly, for some people, overly malicious streak. For example, as she's dangling him off the building in their confrontation on the rooftops, she's got him I think she's got the whip around his ankle or something, and he's dangling there, and he's behind the back without her being able to see, gets his hand on his grappling gun, and they're going through in his mind what he's going to do with this grappling gun. And the last line in that particular descriptor paragraph is, he'll shoot right through her if he has to.
Mm-hmm. Well, but they also make it a point earlier on that, like, Batman never kills. And so we know that didn't carry over to Batman Returns. But
nor did it carry over in Batman '89. I mean, I don't know what Hamm's original script is. So.
I don't really count '89. I don't think it's that
he
bad.
cold-blooded kills some people in that movie, dude. So
he never cold-blood kills anyone in that movie.
He grabs a dude by the neck with his feet, drops him down
in the middle of a fight. In the middle of the fight, while the dude is killing him, that is self-defense, my friend. That is not murder. No, I reject that.
Okay.
The only one I'll give you is he blew up Axis Chemical.
Anyway.
But no, knocking a dude down the belfry in the middle of a knockout, drag-out fight, that's not the same thing.
Well, just because I haven't been on Twitter in a while, I'm going to pull my Twitter personality out and go, Batman would find a way not to be lethal in that situation.
Well, anyway. So they make that a point because once these murders start happening and Catwoman continues to frame Batman, they do make that point. And again, that to me comes from Sam Hamm. I think that Sam Hamm, that's a bigger deal. Tim Burton, obviously, not a big deal. I
never had a problem. Of course, back then I had a real malicious streak anyway, and I wished every superhero killed everybody they ever fought. I never had a problem with the killing in any of those movies, and it really didn't faze me in this. I found it interesting in the couple of moments, like there's the one moment at the end that basically is carried almost directly over into Batman Returns in the confrontation between Batman and Penguin. It didn't bother me then. It doesn't really bother me now. So,
well, and again, that's like, I don't think that is a malicious killing either. All he does is unleash bats on the Penguin, like, especially in Returns, he didn't think it was going to cause a fall. But yeah, that is a moment that carries over. And again, in Returns, it's just something that happens. Here, it's actually a nice payoff to how Penguin has killed multiple people with swarms of birds. Of course,
fully agree. Yes.
Of course, Batman doesn't know that because Batman didn't know that the Penguin was around. So it's just fortuitous that that's how he would take him out. Like that.
Wasn't there a thing where bats were attacking people in the middle of the tree lighting ceremony?
Yeah, so that's another thing.
So he had to believe somebody was behind that. I mean, at this point, he's smart enough to have established that this guy here is in cahoots with Catwoman and obviously knows that they're running this game together. So I mean, he's smart enough to deduce in a big hurry that this guy has used that technology to his benefit. So.
But when the bats were released, Bruce didn't know there was a penguin. And so, yes, when Penguin, of course, holds him at gunpoint and invades Wayne Manor, he's going to go, oh, yeah, you're a bad guy, too. You're working with her. But that's all he knows. He doesn't know anything that happened prior to that.
All right.
As written. And again, that's one of those things that, like, when they did a second draft, I would hope that they would have fixed. Does it make sense? Like, there should have been a scene where Bruce is like, and who are you? Why are you here? So, But yeah, that moment. I mean, I guess since we're at it, eventually, this whole thing leads to them in Wayne Manor. I love the idea of the climax of the film taking place in Wayne Manor and in the Batcave. I actually love that as an excuse to have the finale there. At this point, Penguin takes Vicky by gunpoint and drags her into the Batcave, and Batman has to follow, and he eventually pushes her over, and she's hanging from a ledge. And then he manages to, I forget what he does. I don't know if he shoots Batman or he does something where Batman ends up falling over and also hanging from the ledge with
Yeah,
Vicky.
he shot him a couple times, and that dislodged him from his footing, and he wound up over the rail with her.
Yeah, and so you just ended with, I just feel like that this climax with them, is just too reminiscent of the climax at the end of Batman 89.
That's fair. I get that.
Yeah, because it was like, Vicky had this great thing. She's fighting for the rights of the homeless. They're people too, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, it's like, oh, she's getting kidnapped by gunpoint again. Okay.
That part, I mean, whatever. To that point, Vicky's already impressed me in this one more than she did in the first film. So if she, falls into some sort of a damsel in distress situation at the end there, I mean, flip a coin on what that is. But for me, as I was reading this, I kept thinking to myself, this is his home territory. He would have a distinct advantage in this moment to use the shadows and the different levels of the Batcave and, sensor arrays and equipment and anything else in there. I would have rather Penguin kind of been, the freaking out, looking around his shoulder, trying to figure out where he's at. That sort of a thing in that moment than I would the simplicity of how it played out.
I like that better. I mean, I like the poetic justice of the Penguin going out with a swarm of bats, the way he killed so many other people with a swarm of birds. Like, I like that. But you're right. Like, I love the idea of him using his home turf against the Penguin. I think that's cool. And he does. I mean, that happens earlier on, like where, they get them to different parts of Wayne Manor, and he sparks the security system, and different wings get closed off, and the
Dick
windows
actually
get closed
did the
off.
security system, didn't he?
I think Bruce told him to, didn't he?
I don't think so. I don't think those two
Someone told him
until
to.
after that.
No, but someone told him to, because he wouldn't have known it otherwise.
That's not how I'm remembering it, but that doesn't mean that I'm correct.
Well, I mean, Dick sets off the security system when he breaks back in.
That's what I was saying.
Oh, yeah. No, but like Bruce actually goes and...
Oh, you're talking about shutting down like the steel doors and stuff.
Yes, exactly. He's the one who closes it off with like the doors and the windows and everything, and
which would have been kind of cool to see in and of itself.
Totally. So that's
and the fight in the weapons room and the armory. Oh shoot, dude, that was one of my favorite things in that last sequence.
That's awesome. So yeah, in this whole big finale in Wayne Manor, which would be so cool, like. Yes, there's a big fight scene in the armory room from Batman 89. I love that.
King of the Wicker people getting some action in.
Exactly. Like, those things are like, I'm like, that's so cool. Like, that there were great little callbacks like that. I love that. We mentioned him a few times, but Dick Grayson is in the movie. So we meet him in a little different way. He is homeless, and earlier on in the film, you hear that, some kids saved me from a mugger while these Bat fans did nothing. And then at a certain point, he saves Vicky Vale and helps her out. And so Vicky knows who, was saved by this kid, and she sees his hideaway, which again, I think is a really great moment for Vicky, that she's using her camera to follow him and figure out where he's going. And she figures out where he's staying, which comes into play later, because then when Bruce is on the run from the cops, he remembers what Vicky told him, and ends up going and finding Dick's hideaway as well, crawls in, and then that's when he meets Dick. But in his hideaway, there's this stash of stuff, but in that stash of stuff is a red and green gymnast outfit with the R insignia. And then multiple times throughout the film, Dick gets in on the action. He seems to be able to handle himself just well. He's described as 13 or 14, and he saves Vicky. He's acrobatic. He can kick. He can take care of himself. He's obviously got some talent. He's also got a little bit of anger because he's got his guard up. But at a certain point after he helps Vicky, and then he helps Bruce. And then there's another prolonged sequence in the subways. One of these, it's Tiptree has to go and he gives the final 2 statues to the Penguin and Catwoman in the subway, and that leads to another big action scene in the subway. And Dick involves himself in that and grabs the Raven statues and runs off with them. And so during this, he gets shot by the Penguin, and Bruce takes Dick back to Wayne Manor. So then Dick is now kind of become part of the family. So Dick is now part of the finale of the film. What's interesting, though, is that they only call him Dick. They never say Dick Grayson. And they show you the Robin suit, that it's a gymnast outfit, but he never actually shares his backstory.
Yeah, it's same thing with him as with the villains. You get just enough on him to know who he is, but there's no origin there.
No, yeah, they tell you that, and if you're a nerd like us, you go, oh yeah, it's Dick Grayson. His parents were killed in the circus. He ended up homeless. He keeps this costume as a memento. Got it. But I swear that I had a recollection of when Bruce was in his hideaway, seeing like newspaper clippings of the death of the Graysons. I must have made that up because when I read it this time, it wasn't in there. So
that might have been helpful for audiences to really get a grip on it. But I mean, at this point, after so much history, who doesn't know that an acrobatic kid of that age rolling with Bruce Wayne isn't Robin? I mean, it's...
Well, obviously, I think everyone will know that it's Robin, but not everybody knows his origin.
Okay.
And so they don't give it to you in this. I thought I remembered him telling Vicky or him telling Bruce, but no, they never say it. In fact, Vicky asks him, and he just basically says, none of your business. He doesn't want to share. And so it's just implied, which is interesting.
Maybe they were saving it for the next movie so that the whatever villain they decided to use in part 3 was going to be who was responsible for the death of his parents. Who knows?
Well, I'm sure they were saving it for... Yeah, I'm sure that in Sam Hamm's mind, as he was writing this, he's like, oh, that gives you places to go in the third one. Because here's the other thing. Dick has the costume, but he never puts it on.
I was kind of okay with that. Because I never saw a real again, as presented, not in geek mindset here, as presented, it never made sense for him to have that costume on. If he would have put on some sort of a mask or something, maybe. But at that point, everybody's seen Bruce Wayne's face too. So I mean, it's not like he's got anything he really needs to hide at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, as written, there was not a reason for him to put it on. That is true. And since the movie didn't get made, I'm okay with it too. If I had gone to see this movie and it was going to be my first movie with Robin and Robin never put on the suit, I'd have been pissed.
Fair enough.
So you can write a reason for him to put on the suit. They didn't, which is, again, an interesting choice. But I know that if this had gotten made, I would have been very disappointed.
It's still better than John Blake, but... I asked you earlier.
John Blake's not Robin.
I asked you earlier in Messenger, and you wouldn't tell me, so I'm going to ask you again now. Did you have an issue with them blending Dick and? To me, it felt like it was a blend of Dick and Jason together in that character.
I didn't, and no, it didn't bother me. Doesn't bother me at all because here's the thing: is even though this adds an extra beat to Dick's story of separating the circus from Bruce, it's still the same story. He's still Dick Grayson. Mm-hmm. And so, no, it didn't bother me at all to be like, oh, no, Bruce wasn't at the circus when they died. It happened in the past. This is where Dick ended up, and now Bruce finds him. Because it starts at the same place and it still ends at the same place, so I don't mind mixing up the middle.
Okay. I
so,
really
no,
like
didn't
how
bother me at all.
I really like how they handled it. I like the involvement of him being... in the community of the homeless there and kind of being their unsung defender. Like he's the Batman of the homeless. Mm-hmm. I think that played out really nicely. And then obviously that helps Vicky tie into the story better, being the one who sort of discovers him there and introduces the audience to him in that way. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was pretty well handled with him overall.
No, I agree. No, I like the extra beat of again, I don't mind switching up how they find him as long as he's still him. Mm-hmm. So, no, I like him in this. And there's a great moment. It might be one of my favorite moments in the script, is it's after he's at Wayne Manor. You know, he tries to run off, and they're like, dude, no, you're staying. Relax.
The I can stop you moment, which wound up getting replayed in Batman Forever.
Yeah. He's like, you can't stop me. I can stop you. Better here somehow. Better here.
No, much.
But they leave Vicky with Dick, and Alfred and Bruce are talking, and Alfred says, oh, you know, shouldn't we try to find his parents? Bruce says he doesn't have parents. And Alfred said, how do you know? And Bruce just says, I know.
That was a good moment.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. All due respect to the Robin and his rich history and involvement and everything here, but I do like this concept a little bit better than most of what I've seen with Robins being introduced, and that this kid really already knows how to handle himself really well. So to me, that would spark the idea in Batman's brain. This kid knows how to take care of himself. If I can hone those skills, you know, this is a great asset for me to have out in my quote unquote war versus having some, you know, 10, 12, 13-year-old kid who, you know, has some acrobatic skills and he just one day decides he's going to teach him how to be a crime fighter. You know, I obviously can go with it because I've gone with it for so many years, but somehow the logic here just seems to click better with me.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's always why he's been a gymnast, is so it's not like Bruce is like, oh yeah, I'm going to make you a crime fighter. You know, usually Bruce is like, I'm going to help you because if I don't, you are going to go out there and get yourself killed. So it makes sense. And I think the way they do it here is really good. So, so overall I like Dick. I just think he should have suited up. I think you had to write a reason to make him suit up because it's Batman and Robin.
There was legit a moment there where I didn't know that there was going to be a bat costume in the last action sequence there. Yeah,
I did wonder that too. So when I was reading it, it seemed like there were long stretches without Batman, and I was like, like
that's a recurring theme in most of these movies, though.
Yeah, I'm like, is there enough Batman in this movie? And because there, and I kind of broke it down, and I'm like, you know what? I think there is. There's the big opening chase in the snow with the Batmobile. There's a very short scene later on, the first time he sees Catwoman, where he's remote controlling the Batmobile, basically to see if the cops are after him, which he finds out they are. So he's remote controlling the Batmobile to see if they're chasing him. And then it's the same time that Catwoman is killing one of the five guys, killing Shaw and scrawling a blood bat on the wall for the kids. And then he sees Catwoman kind of escape and he watches her, but that's really it. Then what else do we got? Then there's the first big Batman Catwoman fight, and this is a little reminiscent of something in Batman Returns where the first time they met there, that leads to then Batman being on the run from the cops. Mm-hmm. And then there's the subway. And then there's the finale. So, yeah, I mean, that's actually not bad.
That's a pretty healthy dose.
It's not bad. It just felt like there were long stretches as I was reading where I was like, he hadn't been in the suit in a while. But and all that stuff, though, is how's the movie cut? How's the movie shot? Like, it's not necessarily an issue, especially if some of these big action scenes are really taken advantage of.
Well, I mean, go back to the breakdowns that you did. I mean, what was the average that Batman's in one of these movies? Like 16 or 17%, something like that? Like high end?
That's only for The Dark Knight Rises. The high end was like 22, 23.
So, I mean, the point being that you would have to have long stretches without him with those kind of numbers floating around anyway.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, though.
There's no Batman movie out there where 50% screen time is Batman. You know, it's just not the way it works.
No, you're right. And here's something I will say, probably to the detriment of this movie, is that for as much grief as some fans will give Batman Returns about spending way too much time with everyone but Batman, I think this movie's even worse in that respect, because there are even way more moving parts in this one than there are in Batman Returns. Because in Batman Returns, you've got one Max Schreck. In this one, you've got Shaw and Provost and Tiptree and Barrett. And you have to meet them all and get to know them all and watch them all get murdered. So you've got 4 Max Schrecks in this version. Not to mention Dick Grayson.
And no mayoral campaign.
Yeah. So there's just, like, I feel like there's a lot of more characters to deal with in this one, because by the time we met Provost, I was like, wait, we're meeting another guy? Who's this guy? I'm like, I feel like we're halfway through the script and I'm meeting another new character. Shouldn't I have met him at the beginning? And maybe I did and I missed it.
He was kind of in the beginning, though, because when she first goes into work, he's there, right? Or at least he's mentioned, I thought. Maybe. Okay.
It could be. And maybe it didn't. I didn't take stock of it because I was like, oh, okay, she's talking to someone at work. Or Tiptree. Like, I don't know. Like, there's 4 guys you've got to get to know amongst all this other stuff going on. And so you're dealing with them, plus you're dealing with Dick. We didn't even talk about Gordon. Gordon has a lot more to do in this than he gets
Gordon
in Batman
was great
Returns.
in this, I think.
But he never gets a scene with Batman.
That's true.
So I'm like, oh, come on. Like, wait, Gordon and Batman, you got to let them talk. But he's got a lot more going on here because of the framing story of him going after Batman, but not really believing it. And you get Bullock in this.
Yeah.
Except for some reason his name is Eddie instead of Harvey.
I would imagine they did that because they clearly are trying to establish Harvey Dent early on in this, going back to the first movie and being used in the third movie. So I imagine they don't want to have 2 characters named Harvey just because
I didn't think of that.
Coincidence of it.
Interesting.
Just my own guess there. I don't know if that's true or not. But.
To your point, no Harvey Dent. So if they were going to set him up, like, he's missing. Maybe he would have shown up in part 3 and been like, well, now that I'm back from my 1-year vacation. Or maybe he was away for Christmas vacation.
I had to go back to law school and finish up for the bar exam.
Yeah, they should have, there should be just one line of dialogue. It's like, well, with Dent out of town for the holidays. So, no Harvey Dent and no Alexander Knox. Vicky Vale still works at the Globe.
I'm perfectly fine with that. I am so perfectly fine with that.
No, Knox is the best Batman character.
Get the F off of this show. No,
ever.
No, bye.
No, ever.
Bye.
There's no question. He's the best Batman character.
No
Alexander Knox,
lost your mind.
Greater than John Blake. Sorry.
Sick bastard.
Yeah. So anyway, point being, there's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of different things going on in the story, and so I do wonder if, I know that's why Robin didn't make the cut, is because they inherited the script. Obviously, they changed 90% of it, but that was one of those things where they're like, that's just one too many.
Yeah, I can understand that. I'd love to see. I know we talk about this all the time, things that we wish they'd at least like make a comic book or an animated movie of. Boy, but I love it if they did that with this.
Oh, totally. I'd be right there with you.
Oh, one other thing I want to make sure that I mention. I do not condone violence against women. I am 100% against that. It generally bothers me. Like when I was watching the first half of the first season of Gotham still, and Harvey just cold cocked some girl and knocked her out, I struggled with that for like a day or 2 after because I just didn't like it. But for some reason, even though I don't condone or care for it at all, the superb brutality going on between Batman and Catwoman and that last fight was like jaw-dropping good.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, all of their fights are pretty damn intense. Like there's a certain one where Catwoman is pushing Batman towards a helicopter rotor.
Mm-hmm.
Like they get pretty brutal.
They do, but in that last sequence, you either get the point where he has been holding back with her to that point, Or he's just so utterly fed up with her that he just takes it to another level at that point. Because, I mean, he lays waste to her in that last fight.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, at a certain point, she's like, can barely move.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about shattered ribs, internal bleeding.
Yeah,
I mean,
and she's trying to kill herself.
Yeah.
So yeah, she wants to kill herself, but is so beaten up she can't even do it. She wants Batman to do it.
Donuts, that kill herself thing was getting yanked from the final script if it went to print.
I'm sure, but no, Batman lets her live, and I appreciated that when they drag her away, Bruce says to Gordon, "You might want to look into it. I think she did the killings and not Batman." I appreciated that. Because that's a beat that is missing for Batman Returns. At no point in Batman Returns do they go, hey, Batman didn't do what we said.
This is true.
So I like that they got that little moment. Something else I had to call out, I forgot, is for some reason, Sam Hamm really wanted Batman to ride a horse in a movie. Because in Batman 89...
Dark Knight Returns nod, that's why.
I guess. In Batman 89, there is a deleted segment of the script. They never shot it, but where Batman chases the Joker on a horse. It happens right after the wanna get nuts moment where Joker shoots Bruce. And in the original script, he takes Vicky. And then Bruce gets up, suits up, and much like in this script, jumps on a cop's horse and pursues Joker through the streets. That got cut, didn't get shot. It's not in Batman. And so in Batman 2 here, when he's running from the police, at a certain point, he jumps on a cop's horse and he runs off. So Sam Hamm was like, damn it, Batman needs to ride a horse.
He wants to get that Dark Knight Returns nod in there. And since you brought it up, I'll raise the point that I thought that was pretty ingenious of hooking the cape onto the saddle of the horse. And, kind of turning the horse loose. So from a distance, it looks like he's still on the horse. So they're still chasing after it versus he's doing the sleight of hand thing and going down into the tunnel or wherever it is that Dick is living.
Right.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and then there's a great moment after that where Bruce meets Dick. Once Dick realizes who it is, he gives him a coat and a hat so he could kind of sneak away. And as soon as Bruce is dressed like the homeless, everybody ignores him. So I thought there was just a nice little beat there to reinforce the themes of what was going on with the homeless in Gotham.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to go back to what we said toward the beginning of this episode, once they recover that stolen treasure that's down there, and he just indicates to Vicky with like just a brief one line about, this is a good start to solving the homeless problem here. And I'm thinking, you've got, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of valuable stuff down there. I'm pretty sure you can solve the problem, not just start to solve the problem. But maybe that's me being idealistic about it. But
no, I mean, and that's what we spoke about just a tiny bit at the beginning was once they find this treasure, the treasure was in the Batcave all this time. Vicky says, "Oh, what are you going to do with it?" And Bruce says, "Well, maybe we can build some homes for the people who need it."
Yeah.
So that's your resolution for the homeless crusade.
I just feel like some sort of an epilogue showing the results or showing the construction of these homes with a temporary shelter being there in the park or something along those lines. Just I would have liked just a little bit more thrown on that.
Yeah.
Probably being nitpicky, but
I would have preferred if Vicky had solved it. Since it was kind of her thing.
I would have been fine too.
Anyway, like if she had printed her story and then Gotham rallied around the story, something like that.
And the money was stolen from the people of Gotham to begin with, so giving the money back to the people of Gotham makes perfect sense in the end.
Right. So, that was the little wrap up. There's also another returning locale in this film that I loved was they go back to the museum.
Flugelheim.
They go back to the Flugelheim, and that made me so happy. I was like, because, okay, so apparently Batman 89, they kept all the sets because they were ready to make a sequel. And then Burton was like, I don't want to spend another 6 months in Europe. I want to stay home. And so that's why they shot it on the Warner Brothers lot. But apparently they did save all the sets to make the sequel out in England. And so it makes sense that they would, written into the script are some of those same locations.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, like I love reusing the Flugelheim. It made sense. You know, they're opening this new thing. Every one of these movies has to have a gala. We talked about that. And this is the gala. It's like this big Egyptian exhibit. Selena Kyle works for the museum, we find out, which makes a lot of sense.
She's Tia Carrera in True Lies.
Oh, God, I guess you're right. I forgot she was in that movie. But you're right. That's not wrong. But yeah, like reusing the Flugelheim was so cool.
I could have taken it or leaving. Honestly, it was fine.
It's awesome.
Okay, it's awesome. Sure,
it's awesome. So, it's the connective tissue. Makes you feel like a sequel.
You know what would have made this feel like a sequel to me?
What?
Having the number 2 after the title.
Yeah. So we also mentioned, and we didn't go too deep into it, but the 5 families of Gotham, you find out this backstory.
That's a Godfather nod, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. You find out that like the ancestors of these 5 families, when Gotham was in its infancy, they stole from the city and then bailed out the city at the same time so they could kind of take power. And because of this, they had this treasure, they hid it, and then they, as Jamie said, they didn't need to touch it because now they were in charge and they were they were running things. And that's where these 5 guys all came from. But Bruce was completely unaware of this because Thomas died before he could ever pass it on to his son. And so I think, which one was it? Tiptree managed to get 2 of them, I think.
Yeah,
so like he came and he got Thomas Wayne's Raven because he said, oh, it was a sentimental thing and it was a secret, so no one else knew about it. And so Bruce was completely oblivious to this whole thing. There's a scene where he goes and he meets Tiptree, and Tiptree tells him all about it, and you get this flashback kind of telling this backstory. And at a certain point, that's when Bruce goes, hey, my father was a good man. He was an honorable man. There's no way he would have stood by and allowed this, this deception to continue. And that's when they say, oh, well, why do you think that he was killed? So that's the conspiracy we talked about at the beginning of the episode.
I don't know. I'm good either way with it, I guess. It's whatever.
Yeah, so I wanted to clear that up. I'm trying to not leave any questions.
No, you're right, because not everybody's going to read the script.
So yeah, for the people who aren't reading the script, I want you guys to have the parts and pieces of how it all works together throughout. And so the way it does end is Penguin falls into the abyss of the Batcave after the swarm of bats. So that means that for the rest of his career, Batman's going to be working in there, and somewhere is the corpse of the Penguin just rotting.
I did have that going through my mind of, wouldn't that begin to stink at some point, maybe?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure that cave doesn't smell the best anyway, but come on, man.
In the bottom of a pit behind his computer, right next to Alfred's DJ station, is the rotting corpse of a fat Birdman.
DJ station. This is why I can't have nice things.
And everybody gets shot up in this movie. Everybody.
Oh,
Bruce
man.
gets shot up.
I got
Dick gets shot up.
mad.
Alfred gets shot up.
I got mad because I thought they really did kill Alfred. I was with Bruce on that. I was like, what? No, come on, man.
I just picture poor, sweet Michael Goff, like, doubling over. And I'll be like, oh, God, no, I can't.
But no, it was the flesh wound to the arm.
Yeah, always.
It's nice to have those gentle, kind villains that don't shoot to kill.
Thank God. Movies would be so short otherwise.
It's true. It's very true.
But anyway, so the Penguin, he falls to his death. Catwoman gets beat within an inch of her life. There is a scene earlier on in the film, and this was one that kind of made me cringe a little bit, where Batman's basically like, he's venting to Alfred that he's had the worst day ever, and he's like, this, and I find out this is why my father was murdered, and then I just got the shit kicked out of me by a woman. And I was like, but what is that supposed to mean?
Alfred called him on it.
Alfred calls him on it, but still, I think that would be in the performance. Keaton would have to sell that line, because it's as written, it's a tough line to sell. Anyway, Catwoman survives, and they clear Batman's name by going, hey, you're going to want to look into this lady. And at this point, like, Wayne Manor has been trashed because there's just been all this major shenanigans going on. But
and like
Bruce,
a dick, Gordon just has to say, well, good luck cleaning up all this mess on his way out. That's
right?
just cold.
Well, at least he can afford it.
That's just cold.
But, at the very beginning, it's like, oh, I don't know what to get Vicky for Christmas. Well, Bruce gives Vicky her present, and he proposes. What was that?
That was a fart noise because the crap on that idea.
I mean, we didn't go into it too much detail, but yes, throughout the film, Selina is trying to get her claws into Bruce because she thinks Bruce has one of the ravens. And whenever this happens, of course, it creates tension between Bruce and Vicky, because Bruce is intrigued, but knowing she's trouble. But so anyway, there is a little bit of love triangle going on throughout the movie. And so at the end, Bruce, he finally commits. And he gives her the ring, and so the last shot of the movie is them in Wayne Manor, decorated for Christmas. The Christmas tree, I think, is toppled over at this point, and it's a mess. But it's Alfred and Dick and Vicky and Bruce, and they say something about like this very strange and unique family for Christmas, and that's the end of the movie. I still think you pull out from the Wayne Manor, you go up to the sky, you still get the bat signal.
Yeah, I can live with that. Yeah.
You've got to. Although he should take the rest of the night off. He's had a rough night.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Anything else in there that we did not hit on that you'd like to?
Nothing that I'm going to think of until I wake up tomorrow morning, but
oh, well. So, overall, thoughts and impressions of the script. Jamie, what do you like about it? What do you hate about it?
I don't know that there's anything that I necessarily hate about it, although that proposal thing's it's got to go. Gots to go. No. I've been through too many of this Batman getting hitched thing lately as it is. So yeah, toss that. I don't care for that at all. Everything else I can either deal with to really like it to downright loved it. So I'm kind of sad now that I've read this that I'm probably never going to get to see a version of this brought to life, animation or otherwise. So that's a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, it was pretty exhilarating reading this script. At least for me, it was.
I had the Batman Returns score in my earbuds as I was reading it. Oh, I had a blast.
I went through the whole catalog as I was reading it, the second half of it at work today. I started off with Mask of the Phantasm, and then I went to the Prince album, skipping a song or two on that, and then finished off with Batman and Batman Returns.
Is it Still I Keep Vicky Waiting?
That and Scandalous both. Anyway.
Scandalous is pretty rough.
I don't care for either one of them. Anyway, so yeah, I kind of had that same thing going on. I think this really would have worked. I think they probably would have had a pretty successful film on their hands if they did this. Minor tweaks in there. You made some excellent points about, Penguin and Batman needing to meet prior to that. Gordon and Batman needing to maybe share a screen here and there throughout. Having like a secret meeting because Gordon's convinced that Batman couldn't possibly be guilty of this, so he's having a secret meeting, behind the police station in an alley or something, because obviously they can't do it up where the bat signal's at when he's a wanted guy. But, the few minor tweaks would have really made this something special, I think. If you're going to ask me for a letter grade on this as I read it, I'm thinking in the B+, A- range personally.
I wasn't, but interesting nonetheless. Well, then here's the big question. Did you prefer this over Batman Returns?
It's difficult to say, because I do love the insanity that is Batman Returns. I make no bones about liking that movie, but I also make no bones about it's definitely kind of off on its own. Because as you say, obviously you feel thematically like it does come along with Batman 89, but it follows nothing that comes after for obvious reasons. I don't know that I can say I definitely would have liked this better, but I probably would have liked it at least as much.
All right. Yeah, there's a lot to like in this. My favorite things, and I think I said at the beginning, my favorite thing is that it is a bona fide sequel, and I love that. I love all the little nods and the connective tissue between Batman 89 and this script. I love that. I love that it's still Christmas. And I kind of like the idea of a. It's funny how I've turned around on it, but I kind of like the idea of just this really unrepentant Catwoman. I think there's something kind of cool about that. I like that Vicky's in this, and I like that Dick is in this. There's a lot to like here. I'm not as crazy about the treasure hunt on the Ravens. I don't think that's a super compelling plot. It's okay. I just feel like there could be something better. But this definitely reads like a first draft because there's some massaging that needed to take place. Obviously, there's some things I called out throughout, especially with Batman and Penguin. That one you need to fix. Batman and Commissioner Gordon you can get away with, but I still think the movie's better if you let them meet. I think for me, the biggest thing that shows that this is a first draft is most of the dialogue is pretty meh. And that's normal in a first draft, is because you're just getting the structure together and you're just figuring out the story and the beats, and then you go back and you punch up the dialogue later. And as I read it, it seems like they never got around to punching up the dialogue because there's a lot of cliches in here. There's a certain point where Catwoman says, "No pain, no gain," and it's like that shouldn't make it into the final cut. You go back and you find those cliches, and it's a writer's trick, is you use the cliches to get the draft out, and then you go back and you circle them and you go, okay, now I need to think of a more unique and interesting way of saying this, and now I need to think of a way to say this, and I don't think it ever got that far. So I think that the dialogue needed a lot of punching up because it's pretty it's functional but uninspired. The conversations that happen are just really they're like normal to a fault. Whereas say what you will about Batman Returns, but man, it's quotable as hell. And there's really not much that's quotable in this. They didn't get that far. So I think that needed some work too. Like I said, I think that there's a lot of moving parts, and I do wonder if it was even more complex than what we ended up getting in Batman Returns. But there's still a lot to like here. Like Jamie said, and we've said it with all of these what if scenarios, is make an animated movie. I'd watch the shit out of it. Like even if you did a comic book adaptation, I'd read that too. Because it is fun to think about what could have been. I think
if only DC had some kind of a platform where they could make movies specifically for it, where fans of DC stuff could see that. Somebody write a letter to them or send a text somewhere or something.
Okay, we will. So it's fun to think about what if. I do think, like, my tastes aside, I do think this probably would have been better received than Batman Returns, at least in the moment. Again, I think time has been kind to Batman Returns because most people, well, not most, a lot of people have grown to really appreciate it for what it is. But I think that this is a little more crowd pleasing and what would have been expected by a sequel than what we eventually got.
The best thing about this one going into production versus Returns, we probably wouldn't have gotten the Schumacher films. At least not as they were presented final form. That's probably true. So yeah, it's a fascinating read. I do recommend you read it. If you don't read it, hopefully
we explained enough of it that you were able to follow along. Like, that's my fear of like, oh, let's talk about something that not everybody's read. I hope it made sense. I tried to hit those explanations as we went, but yeah.
And then my scatterbrain self jumping all over the place doesn't help. So that's my bad on that, people.
It's fine. I'm sure it's fine. So anyway, yeah, I really like it. But I don't know if I would trade it for Batman Returns, because I still love Batman Returns for what it is. Like I said, I think that the portrayals of Penguin and Catwoman in Batman Returns are meatier. They're more interesting than what's in here. That's a little more straightforward. I like that. I like the tragic, we've talked about it. I love the tragedy of the Penguin in Batman Returns, and here he's just a bad guy, So there's a lot to like here, and there's a lot to like in Returns. I don't know. I guess for me, I would take Batman Returns, but like steal some of the stuff from this to make it more of a sequel to Batman.
Fair enough.
Letter grade, yeah, B+. Yeah, sure.
B+ is good.
Yeah. 6 is good.
Just couldn't not do a Knox quote there.
I mean, you kind of set me up for it.
I kind of did. That's totally my fault.
So Batman 2, written by Sam Hamm. Interesting hypothetical scenario, but cool to look back at. Again, you know where to find it if you get bored and want a couple hours to put on your Batman music and give it a read. See what you guys think.
Don't let your friend tell you it'll only take you an hour to read it, because that's bullshit.
Yeah, any friend who would tell you that is a damn liar, and you should punish him somehow. No dessert. I don't know. So anyway, we are already at past an hour and a half, and my dear friend Jamie Drewley, he needs his sleep. So we are going to skip the Wayne Manor mailbox for this episode, and maybe I'll find some time to dedicate a special episode to just catching up on the Wayne Manor mailbox. It's been a while since we've done that. So yeah, that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of Holy BatCast with our little look at the script for Batman 2. Jamie, always a pleasure. Thanks for making the time, and thanks for staying up late.
Oh, it's way past my bedtime. In fact, it's almost time for me to wake up now. You have me up so late. So, but yeah, it was a good time. I enjoyed reading the script, and I enjoyed talking about it with you.
Yeah, it was a good time. I agree. Well,
like I said, I totally look forward to doing something like this again in the future. Just maybe have to space them out a little bit,
That's fine. I get it.
But anyway, we got you mentioned the Wolfgang Peterson one for Batman versus Superman, and I've had a hankering to read the script for Justice League Mortal for about a year and a half, 2 years anyway. So,
you know what else is out there? Is the script to the Catwoman movie that Daniel Waters wrote.
Oh, I can't begin to imagine how insane that must be.
I've never read it, but it's out there. I have read Batman vs. Superman. The Kevin Andrew? Yeah. That guy?
After what you told me about Superman Flyby, I got zero interest in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I have read that one, but I have not read Justice League Mortal, and I've not read Catwoman. But
is there one out there for Batman Unleashed?
No, it never got to the script stage.
Okay.
I think it was just some vague ideas. Just like there's no version of the Tim Burton Batman Forever either. Like, he tells the story. He barely got to think about it before Warner Brothers was like, "No, you're good. Don't worry about it. We're good." But yeah, I mean, if you guys out there listening enjoyed it, let us know, and we'll do it again.
Cool.
If you want to keep up with Jamie, just keep tuning in here, because he's still on his internet hiatus, which is why he sounds so much calmer than usual.
Yeah, I'm all kinds of mellow now.
It's good. I like it.
It's better than smoking a bowl.
Perfect. If you know where to find me, you know where to find the show, but that will do it for this episode of Holy BatCast. Thank you for downloading the show. Please do subscribe on iTunes. Please leave us an iTunes review. And like Michael Keaton's Batman says, I want you to tell all your friends about me. Visit holybatcast.com and go all over social media. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. It's Holy BatCast. But that'll do it for this episode. On behalf of Jamie, I've been Andy. This is Holy BatCast. We'll see you next time. Same bat time, same bat channel. This show is a proud part of the Real Fans Podcast Network. You can sample all the shows that are part of the network at rf4rm.com. Those shows include Real Fans for Real Movies, the original show that looks back at films past and present. There's also Holy BatCast, all about Batman and the DC Universe. There's Disorder, every Disney film that looks back at every Disney animated feature in order. There's Taking the Bullet, that looks at bad movies so you don't have to watch them. There's Please Rewind, the RF4RM retro show that looks back at older movies. And finally, there's Grim Grinning Hosts, a salute to all pop culture, but mostly theme parks. Again, you can check out all these shows at rf4rm.com or search for them by name wherever you get your podcasts.
Holy BatCast is brought to you by Real Fans for Real Movies. Remember, the thoughts and opinions shared by the participants are theirs and theirs alone, and do not represent the companies or organizations they happen to work for.
You make it so easy, don't you? Always waiting for some Batman to save you. I am Catwoman.